Hello, Doug.
Sabrina, thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. You are one of my favorite bachelors, if I may. But I love following your journey. I've loved watching you and learning about you and discovering you. So I'm super, super excited to bring you to the Do the Work audience. And just yeah, so excited to have you. And I'm would love to kind of dive in. I think it's always important when everybody would give a little bit of who you are, what's your history. You have a very colorful past that I can't wait to talk about and get into, but I would just love to hear a little bit from you.
Right. So the reason that we connected is through my podcast, The Adversity Advantage. And what's interesting is, I started that podcast to help people use hard times and hard situations in life to their advantage and to learn and grow and to develop wisdom and courage and strength and all those things from those situations. And the ironic thing is growing up, I used adversity to my complete disadvantage. And my adversity was divorce, parents' divorce, I should say, getting bullied in school, getting picked on, girls rejecting me and all that stuff. And that led to me wanting to check out and self-medicate. And I started to do that with drugs. And that led to me progressively getting more addicted to drugs and things like it started with marijuana, then it progressed to cocaine, Oxycontin, then I was selling a bunch of drugs to make money. And then I ended up going to jail when I was 21 years old on felony drug charges. And to bring this back full circle, and I'll let you go with this wherever you'd like, is that moment of adversity, which I thought was going to be the worst situation in my life, because when I got to jail, I was this kid who's 50 pounds heavier than I am now, mentally, spiritually, emotionally broken, 21 jobs, hopeless, depths of despair, depths of addiction. And my cellmate ended up getting me into exercise when I was in jail, and it completely transformed my life. And it inspired me to understand and help others understand that the situation that you're in, while it's can be incredibly challenging. I know obviously this is heavily focused on relationships. So I'll just use like the breakups and the divorce and all that stuff can be incredibly stressful. However, I think there's no other way to deal with it other than to do what's best for yourself and to respond in a healthy way. And I responded to similar situations in very unhealthy ways growing up, and that landed me in jail. And so my experience in jail taught me that we can't control sometimes our circumstances and what happens, but we can control the response. And I was able to use that to completely transform my life and then inspire others to, make the most of challenging times. And the last thing I'll say is, like, specifically during like a breakup, it's like you have to accept that the situation is hard and it's painful. And this is just me just speaking from wisdom from what I've learned over the years, just through my own journey and what I learned in jail. But also, like, there's a choice. It's like in most cases, it's not the breakup that destroys people's lives. It's the drinking bottles of wine after for months. It's the smoking tons of pot or the drugs or whatever the coping mechanism is that ends up now creating other problems in your life, damaging your self-esteem and self-worth even more, because you shouldn't be doing those things and that you're better than that when you respond to situations like that. And so I just invite people, like, I guess, just to get things started, to just take the situations that they're in, even as hard as a breakup can be, and just know that you deserve better than to self-medicate and destroy your life even more.
I love that. I love how we inadvertently, I'm like, I kind of love what we're on right now, like breakups. It's I think because I'm so on your team on this because like I have always been a fan of like turn your pain into purpose. Like I'm with you. I can totally relate. Like growing up, you're like, wow, I had all these adversities and I had all these things. And now as adults, we're like, oh, this is how I can use this to my advantage. Yeah, if only I'd known when I was 13 that this is such an amazing thing that we have now in our adult life that we didn't know then. But I think it's so inspiring because everybody has gone through hard. Every one of us has gone through hardships. We've gone through difficulties, and especially you, like going to fucking jail, having to say goodbye, I would imagine, to years of your life, to all of these hopes and dreams potentially that you thought you were going to have. Then of course the understanding of like what the fuck happens when you're in there, what's going to happen when you're out. Like I would definitely love to dive into a little bit more of like your mental health with all of this? Like, did you suffer from anxiety or not suffer? Did you have anxiety? Is anxiety part of your life? And like, how did that manifest with you going to jail? Like, what the fuck happened to your body and to your mental state with that within that time frame?
So a big part of why I went to jail was because I was self-medicating with drugs for my anxiety. And what ended up happening was I initially started to self-medicate with marijuana growing up. And that looked like, just riding around with my friends, smoking blunts, smoking joints, ripping bong hits, smoking bowls. I mean, I sound like old saying this because I know a lot of that might sound foreign to like people like I guess like the younger crowd that might be listening to this. And I started to get really addicted to not only the pot and how it made me feel. Because when I first started smoking pot, I felt this massive weight come off my back that I could finally be at peace with myself. I could finally, I didn't have to worry about whether girls were going to like me. I didn't have to worry about, what my parents' relationship was going to look like. I didn't have to worry about what would happen in school and if I was going to get picked on. I could just be at peace with myself. So that feeling became hyper addictive for me because I was so unhappy with who I was as a person. And I was just upset at the world that I was like, why is all this bad stuff happening to me? So, I had tons of instability, tons of insecurities, tons of uncertainty that led to just developing tons of anxiety that I in turn, used pot to numb all of that. And then because I grew up in a broken home where my parents were divorced, split custody, they didn't have the best relationship. I turned to my friends a lot, even though they didn't have the best influence on me, even though maybe they weren't the best people to spend time with in that type of situation. I turned to them for community. So I almost got addicted to like my friends in a way, because they filled this void that I had missing from me. And so I would just, I talk about settling. Like, I mean, I was hanging around kids that would pick on me all the time. And I for some reason, just kept coming back because I felt like that's what life was supposed to be like for me. I felt like that's what I deserved. I felt like it's okay. Like I'm still hanging out with the cool crowd and partying and doing all that stuff. So I'll sacrifice my own well-being in the process. And so what ended up really happening was I started to develop really bad anxiety along the way, after high school, as I started to progress more into harder drugs like cocaine. And as I started to sell, pot to make a bunch of money. And I ended up getting panic attacks. And this is back, and gosh, I'm 35 now. This is back in, I don't know, like the early, or like mid 2000s or so, where nobody talked about mental health, specifically guys never, sure as heck never talked about mental health. And there was no talk about panic attacks. And so what ended up happening was one night I was driving home from making a drug deal. I was like, I don't know, like 17 or 18 years old. I forget exactly how old I was, but somewhere around there. I was high on coke. I was smoking cigarettes. I was eating fast food all the time, high on weed, selling drugs. And my heart started to race and my face went numb and I started to panic. And at the time I had been kicked out of both my parents' houses, I was kicked out of my mom's house on my 16th birthday, and ended up completely changing schools, changing like my environment, went and lived with my dad full time. So now I was living with him full time and not even with my brothers, full time. I was now only seeing them half the time as well, because I only got to saw them when they got to my dad's house. So again, there was this like fundamental anxiety that was already starting to build at the time that I was just describing. And then I gotten kicked out of my dad's house shortly after I graduated high school because I didn't want to, abide by the rules. I wanted to continue to do what I wanted to do and get high and do drugs and stuff like that. And so at this time I was crashing on a friend's couch because that summer after high school, because I didn't have a place to go, my friends would let me, stay on their couches for a week or two at a time. And I finally found myself at on a more permanent couch. It was with one of my like good buddies at the time. But the rule was like, hey, when I go off to college in the fall, like you got to be out. And so this night where I start freaking out, I'm going back to his house. And at that time he had just gone off to college, but his parents were like, all right, well, you're a good kid. We've known you for a long time. You can stay here, but just work on like getting out of here. Right. And I got up to his house and I started to scream, like, help me. I'm dying. And his mom came out and was like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm dying. I'm having a heart attack. We need to go to the hospital. She was like, Doug, you're not dying. And I'm like, yes, I am. So anyway, she rushes me to the emergency room, and I walk in the emergency room screaming that I'm dying and dying and dying. And again, up until this point, I had no idea what a panic attack was. No clue. I just thought that something was wrong with me, or I was just too high or something. And they ended up like strapping me down to a bed, I guess, in a room, and like taking all my vitals and asking me questions. And I was honest with what I was doing. And they were like, well, for as much damage as you're doing to your health, like your heart is really strong and your vitals are great. They were like, you just had a really bad panic attack. And so from there, I didn't really understand what that meant. They were like, hey, go to therapy, which I wasn't about to go to therapy because I just, it wasn't something I was willing to do at that time. But I did like come across this book that was like how to deal with panic attacks. And so just imagine me being this, goofy kid selling drugs, doing drugs, and among my group of friends that pick on me, and I'm like the laughing stock of my friend group. I'm now riding around with them with this book, and every time I would get high and have a panic attack, I would have to sit in the back seat of my own car and have to read my book and try to figure out how to calm myself down, which I couldn't figure out how to do because I didn't have any patience back then. I was only worried about like self-medicating as fast as possible. And it got to a point where I couldn't hang around my friends anymore without having this massive anxiety attack. And that led to me trying Oxycontin or Percocet for the first time, which took all of the pain away. It took all the pain from, it took the pain that the pot took away. It took the pain away from the stuff that the pot did. It took all the anxiety that I had developed as a result of that. And then everything that had happened in the years that followed that, it took everything away. And that became hyper addictive for me. And very quickly, I became hooked on Oxycontin, and 5 milligrams a day turned into 10, 20, all the way up until the point where by the time I went to jail, I was doing like 400 milligrams of Oxycontin up my nose every single day to
Holy
support my
shit.
habit. Yeah. So that's that. So to bring things kind of back to what you asked me, and the reason I wanted to provide some context is yes, like anxiety has played a massive role in my life. And that's how I showed up when I went to jail. Like the last thing I did was, did a bunch of drugs and I walked into jail.
It's so interesting, especially like don't talk about a story, but like it's true. The perception back in the day of like, I'm not going to therapy. What guy? I'm not fucking talking about my feelings. And I have it the other way. So my brother had a drug problem when I was in high school. Okay, I'm kind of
Mm.
similar to you, same kind of like good kid, just like struggling, hurting, dealing with the parents, dealing with all this home. And so being on the side of the child in the family receiving this, like if you have siblings, obviously, like I can relate to that. I never really understood the self-medicating component of it. Like, now that we do all this work and we understand this, of course I can look and have compassion and say, oh my God, yeah, you're trying to escapism and you're trying to just get away. And it's so funny because you actually described what a lot of people I think are trying to do right now, whether it be wine or their distraction is like something that could be legal. It doesn't necessarily have to be an illegal substance, but the like, let me intellectualize by reading it in a book, as opposed to, wait, I need to sit and feel it in my body and I need to connect back with myself. It was very like, okay, let me just like distract, let me get into the book and then you started taking drugs, which was like, let me numb how I feel. And then it's interesting because then obviously you go to jail, you're smack in the fucking face. Now you got to feel all this shit. So what was that transition like, going from I'm going to medicate and avoid feeling this pain as much as I possibly can to now you're locked up in a cell, which I'd imagine would bring out every demon that you possibly have because you don't have anything of your normalcy. Well, how were you able to transition and not literally go fucking insane?
I'll get to that in a second, but you brought up something that I want to make sure that I put a bow on, and that like when I say like, when you go through a breakup, self-medicating with things like wine and pot, and I know I think dating apps can be a form of self-medicating for a lot of people, right?
Totally. Yeah.
I'm not the police when it comes to that stuff. Like I don't think I'm not here to tell anybody to not do certain things. However, what I can say is when I took my first hit off that marijuana pipe, I never thought in a million years that I would wind up in jail because of that. There was a lot of things that happened as that. There's a lot of things that led up to my incarceration, and it started with the pot, and it started with me not being able to get high enough, and then developing massive paranoia from the pot. That now the pot wasn't working anymore for my fix, right? So now I had to move on to something else. So I always encourage people to really, I'm sure you talk a lot about self-awareness, to be really aware
Yeah.
of why you're doing certain things. And so when I went to jail, I was a mess, complete mess. I
Yeah.
mean, I detoxed cold turkey of Oxycontin for
Oh,
weeks. And my soon to be cellmate, Eric, was sitting at the table playing Scrabble. And he asked me, because he could just tell, like I was like a zombie walking around in there. I was completely anxious. There was one night where I was screaming for help because I was just detoxing off all this stuff. And I was also detoxing off of cigarettes too, which is gnarly in itself, that I didn't know how to manage my pain. I didn't know how to manage emotions because before jail, I could manage emotion with drugs. I could manage emotion with drama. I could manage emotion with anger. I could manage emotion. I mean, with creating, with being angry and all these things that I could use to deal with the pain in an unhealthy way at that time. But in jail, like you said, I was faced to deal with these things head on. So my cellmate, after him seeing me behaving in certain ways and just looking like a complete mess in there, was like, dude, you're going to start working out with me when you get through your detox. And Eric, the way I describe him was he was like a more jacked version of Brad Pitt from Fight Club, like just super
oh,
shredded.
yeah.
And I looked at him and I was a little intimidated because I was like, man, like this guy is so jacked. Like, what's he going to have me do? And all these things. And plus, I could have been a model for Pillsbury at the time. And there was no way that I was going to exercise at all. I was so out of shape. Like I was 40% body fat. Like I'm not exaggerating.
Shit.
Like I
Okay.
was, yeah.
Uh,
And so soon after that, Eric and I had a conversation that changed my life. And I felt like, I mean, can I cuss on here?
oh, are you fucking kidding me? Please.
And I want to preface this by I'm gonna use some language that some people might find offensive. And when I share this, I want to say, number one, I was in jail. Number two, it wasn't the words necessarily that made me change. It was the context around the words that did. And this is a really important lesson here. So we were in the cell, and like any coach who's trying to convince you to do something or make a change would do, he asked me questions. He's like, so like, why are you in jail? Why were you addicted to drugs? Why were you doing all these things? And I started to blame my parents. I started to blame the girls for rejecting me. I started to blame like, the kids for picking on me. I started blaming the teams that didn't pick me for sports. And he looked at me and he said, quit being a bitch. And I was shell shocked. I was like, what did this guy just say to me? Right. And because I was expecting him to be like, it's okay, Dougie. Like the world is so bad. The world's against you. Like it's okay. And I wanted him to, at that time to tell me what I wanted to hear, but he told me what I needed to hear. He's like, Doug, there's plenty of people that go through what you went through that aren't in jail, right, Doug? And I'm like, yep. He's like, you're blaming every person for your problems. He's like, you're blaming every other person for your problems but yourself. He was like, you chose to respond to your situation in the way that you did. He's like, you have two choices. You can be a man, look yourself in the mirror, and say that you got yourself here and it's up to you to change. No one's coming to save you. No one's coming to rescue you. Or you can go be a bitch and go cry in the corner, blame everybody else for your problems and say, woe is me. And he's like, a lot of people, most people will do that because that's the easy way out. And I did that all up until that point in my life and I think this happens a lot. And this is what I was trying to get at with the adversity conversation we started with, in that sometimes in life we have this event that happens, like the events that I described for myself. And because I had these events that honestly I think were unfair for me, right? Certainly unfair, but I was able to use them as an excuse to behave in whatever way I wanted to because of those things, because I could always point back to that. I could do a million other things across the course of a decade or whatever and be like, it's because of the divorce. I did this because of the divorce. Well, the divorce happened like 15 years ago. Or I did this because of a girl rejecting me at prom. Well, that happened like 3 years ago. Like, you see where I'm going with this. And so at that time, when I was having the conversation with Eric, the drugs were, essentially out of my system, a good bit at least. And I was able to think somewhat clearly. I was like, you know what? Like, I honestly don't have everything figured out. Clearly, what I was doing before didn't work. Blaming everybody else for my problems got me into jail. So maybe I'm going to give this exercise thing a shot with him. And because I also was like, man, like, why does this guy, like, what does this guy want from me? Like, what is he, because he had no skin in the game. He wasn't like, I didn't know him before I got to jail, wasn't a member of my family. And so I just was like, man, like if this guy believes in me, he wants to help me, I'm going to give it a go. And when I got down to do a push up in front of a bunch of, first of all, I was just the most insecure person ever, right? So the thought of me getting down to exercise in front of a bunch of grown men was mortifying for me because I knew because up until that point, I was considered a failure to myself. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get down and do a push up. I'm not going to be able to do one. Everyone's going to laugh at me and think I'm a failure because that's what I was used to before. And I convinced myself that was going to happen again. And I got down to do a push up, couldn't do a push up, and nobody laughed at me. They looked at me, of course. I mean, because they were like, what is this guy doing? Right. But nobody laughed at me. They just kind of were doing their own thing. And then with my cellmates' motivation and encouragement, training me in there every single day during my 90-day sentence, I was able to do a set of 10 push-ups and run a mile by the time I left jail. And the bigger thing that I think you were getting at as you asked me this question is I learned to reattach behavior to emotion. I talked about how I responded to emotions before I went to jail, but now I found this new tool that could be used to help me during stressful situations and during times where I felt anxious. And so like during my sentence, when I would be, anxious, I had the opportunity to exercise or to walk or to jog or to run. When I got out of jail and things were still hard, instead of looking for a drug to self-medicate, I would find a place to run or I'd find a place to do some push-ups or some calisthenics. He also worked with me on how I talk to myself because I walked like this, like, hunched over because I just was so I've just defeated and down on myself that he was like, no, you got to start like walking with your shoulders back, chest up, and start talking to yourself in a different way. And so he taught me all these valuable insights that I learned in the midst of adversity, which I think has really, really helped me a lot because it's easy to meditate. It's easy to exercise. It's easy to say affirmations when life's good. But when life's hard, that's when it really counts. That's when you can actually see if you believe in that stuff and you see
Oh,
value in it, right?
100%. I mean, it's so funny. You and I have very similar stories in the sense where it was like, had some shit happen, you feel lost and it's like, because I don't know about you, but like, I know at least for me, like, I'm so grateful for the adversity that I went through. Like, I'm so grateful for all of these really fucked up, hard situations. And I had kind of similar experience of like, so I can completely empathize and understand like where I was going through the world being like, but why is everything happening to me? I don't understand. Why is everything happening to me? And one day when my mom was sick and my sister, I remember her just looking at me and she's like, when the fuck will you understand you are the reason all of this keeps happening? And I remember it was that same moment where the light bulb went on where I was like, holy fuck. Am I like, is this me? That the ego had to finally look and turn around full circle and was like, bitch, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and understand that like actions have a reaction. Yes. Is it an explanation? Okay. My father did this, thus it caused this kind of anxiety and da. So in the past, I used to behave this. Or is it an excuse? Well, because my dad did this, like you said, well, because I came from divorced parents, then I was able to do this. And I love that essentially like, because I'm the same. I found fitness, I found health and wellness. It really like brought me, I cut off all my meds cold turkey, quit smoking. So like I know the withdrawals, I know the pain. And I think what I try to explain to like most people, it's like if you avoid being triggered or if you avoid this discomfort, you're never gonna fucking grow. You won't be able to be Doug, who comes out of jail and creates this incredible life and writes books and becomes a motivational speaker and has a podcast. You won't be able to be like me, who has used my pain and created a story in order to help other people. Because without going through it and just trying to avoid getting hurt, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to get in pain. By spending so long avoiding that, you're actually avoiding doing the shit that you need to do, which is go through that. Because as a kid, it's like if kids didn't scrape their knees, and they probably wouldn't learn how to walk. Like if we didn't hurt ourselves doing things, we wouldn't get back on the bike and keep going. And so I think it's such a beautiful testament to that. You literally took like one of the lowest points. Like this could have been your entering prison, could have been the first of 30 different times you were in. You could have been a lifetime offender and been in for the rest of your fucking life. And instead, you took it and were like, yes, while I might not be where I want to be, it doesn't mean I can't get there. And I love that you even use the example of the push up, because I think that is such a clear indication of the projections that we have and that core belief that we have about ourselves that we project onto everybody else and assume that they know. And especially when it comes to the dating world, I kind of see this all the time. Every guy is this. Everybody does this to me. Everyone's going to do this. And I'd love to even just talk about mindset a little bit, because I think you have talked about that so much. And I think that is something that's so part of your writings and the speaking that you do and things like that, of like the importance of mindset. That like if I went outside right now and said I want to find a blue car, I'll find 100 blue cars, because my brain is literally looking for that. What are anything like, do you have any tools or tips or tricks or things that you love for anybody that's really struggling with a mindset? Like, I can imagine when you went into jail, you might have had that. Like, what have you found that's really helped you in really shifting your mindset, or at the very least, a start or something like people can start to do to go into that world?
I think it really helps to have a vision of the person that you want to become, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like for
mm-hmm.
me, we can talk about this as well, but for me, I wanted to be ripped. Like I wanted to be happy. I wanted more for myself. And I like get emotional talking about this because I can still remember like how I felt when I was thinking about that when I was in jail. Like I wanted to be this man that I could look in the mirror and be proud of, right? And so I started to reverse engineer that process and say, okay, like I know that if I do certain things, I'm not going to be that person. If I continue to sell drugs, do drugs, not exercise, whatever, I'm going to be very far removed from that person I want to be. But I know that if I do certain things on a daily basis, it doesn't, it's not going to guarantee me that I'm going to be this, this complete person that or this person that I want to necessarily become. But it's going to get me it's going to guarantee that I get pretty close to that. So I identified some of those things I needed to do. And that was like the way I ate, like nutrition, the way I talked to myself, types of people I wanted to spend time with, exercising, personal development, spending time alone, setting goals. And I started to do those kinds of things every single day. And those things started to compound. Right. And I
Yeah.
focused on the day because I think it's great to, like I said, I had this vision of who I wanted to be. Then I was like, all right, I know in my past, like before, when I would say I wanted to do something, I would get so overwhelmed and so insecure about it that I would quit because it seemed so far away. So now I was like, all right, I'm just going to focus on doing the daily things and then seeing where that gets me. So that's like a first tip is really like envisioning the person you want to become. You want to be a better partner? Great. Like, what are some of the things on a daily basis you got to do to become a better version of yourself so that you can become a better partner? What does that look like for you? And then do
Yeah.
those things, right? You want to transform your health. Great. Like, what about your health do you want to transform? Oh, you want to lose 30 pounds? Just using this as an example. Great. That's awesome. Great goal. Identify why you want to do that. And then identify on a daily basis, like, what are the things you need to be doing? How many steps do you need to be getting in a day? What types of workouts should you be doing? What types of people should you be spending time with that are going to help influence you to make better decisions, right? Or
Yeah.
what's your affirmations going to look like for you to be able to believe in yourself? So that's one. The other thing, which isn't really a tip, it's just reality. Like pain is this lever. It just is, right? And I think pain is the ultimate catalyst for growth. I like my biceps to be big, right? So I know in order for me to grow my biceps and for them to become strong, I need to put them into pain. I need to train until failure for near failure for my biceps to grow, right? I want to run a faster mile. I have to literally, be in some sort of pain or huff and puff or whatever for me to be able to get to that faster mile. You want a great relationship? It's going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of pain. It's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take, not, doing, not like moving too fast. It's going to take opening up and being vulnerable. That's a lot of pain. But the blessings that come from that are, you know, the blessings that come from that are some of the most beautiful things ever, because you're going to teach yourself the value of hard work and playing the long game and believing in yourself and working on yourself. Whereas if you're like, all right, I'm in pain right now, this is hard, so I'm just going to get on a dating app and I'm going to just go on 20 dates, a week or whatever, you never really understand like how to deal with the unknown and the uncertainty of all that and being able to play the long game when it comes to a relationship. I mean, I could go on with examples, but that's one of the biggest things is understand that pain is your greatest teacher. Pain is your greatest tool for personal growth. Like, I'm sure every single person listening to this podcast right now, there's some level of pain in their life maybe specifically in a relationship or in a potential relationship, they want to address and they want to get better. Right. And I think that goes for like anything in life. Like anytime you make a great transformation, it's because you were in some place of pain.
100%. I use the gym example all the time. I'm like, okay, when I wanted to grow my ass, I was a big glute girl, and I was like, I want it. And I'll never forget my trainer. She's like, I can give you all the shit in the world. I can tell you everything you need to eat. I can tell you what to train. She's like, that's not the hard part. She's like, what the hard part is you showing up every single day and doing it and doing your deadlifts and doing your glute bridges and doing your hip thrusts you fucking hate and eating all the protein. Like I knew what I needed to do. And now it's been 2 years and it's been fucking hard work. And it's like the difference is it's like, could I have just gone, oh, fuck it, I'll just go get a BBL and like skip the weight and I'll just go have somebody inject something in me. And it's like, while still then probably feeling empty, feeling now less than that I skipped the line and now I just like had somebody do it for me. And the end result isn't that the ass was what was going to make me happy. It's the hard work and the dedication that I put into it, knowing and proving to myself that I could do that. And with that, like you said, comes an incredible amount of discomfort. How many days I couldn't even sit properly? How many days at the gym you're fucking hating your life, doing a movement, going, oh, I fucking hate it. But then at the end, you're like, but I know I can't always just do what I want and expect that life is going to go how I want it. The only way out is through. And I think I'm glad you said it because it's like, I think a lot of people, they'll come to me in the beginning of their journey, seeing me how I am now, being like, okay, well, how do I just stop this anxiety? How can I just like make this go away? And I kind of sometimes I'll chuckle. I'm like, you're not going to like my answer because like that doesn't exist. I'm like, you want to do it? You got to take some hard fucking work. You need a thicker skin. And it's like, kind of like what you said earlier about Eric, like not coddling you. That's kind of my take on it. I'm like, we don't need another person out in the world to say, it's okay. It's not you. It's everybody else. You didn't do anything. It's like, actually, sometimes we do someone that needs someone that's going to come up and say, yo, by the way, what the fuck is your problem? What is your part in this? How are you showing up? Where are you showing up? What's coming up for you? Because it can't always be that we blame everybody else and just say, well, I don't want any tough work. It's like both of us. I know you and I 100% are where we are now because we ate shit. But while doing that, we got tools along the way. It's kind of like Mario Kart. When I first start the round, every banana is getting me. But then after a while, I'm scooting through and I'm able to get around. And I now have some tools and understanding of how to navigate the world in order to fucking get through it so that the world doesn't kick your ass. You end up kicking its ass. Because I feel like you in prison, it could have gone either way. You could have totally seceded and been the little bitch, and you weren't.
It almost went that way though, because I mean, it was really hard to convince me to get into exercise, but I'm obviously so thankful that I did. And I think that a lot of times we value like the shiny object or the destination, right? Like I honestly thought like that being ripped was going to be the thing that I talk about, right, all the time, and that was going to be the thing that was going to make me the most happiest. But if you notice, like I don't talk about I don't talk about my physique or anything that I've really achieved athletically. What's really meaningful for me and what's built the most confidence in my life and what's provided me the most joy is my experience in jail and going from the person who couldn't do a push-up to being able to do a push-up and two push-ups and then all the way up into a set of 10. It's going from the person that was down and out and that was in the depths of hell as far as my mental health and addiction, and being able to crawl out of that and being able to live today to tell my story. It's the same thing with relationships. I mean, I've never been married, so maybe this is hard for me to say, but I guarantee you most relationships that are like long standing, they're not like, man, the best thing about a relationship was our wedding. Like that was the best thing. Right. And a lot of times that's the destination. That's what people want. They want to get married or they want to buy the house. More or less from what I've understood from talking to people that I know have been married for decades, it's like being there through thick and thin and some of the experiences and some of the little things and the laughs and, getting married when they had nothing and, working their way out of that and being able to, build a life together. Like all these things is like what people value as far as relationships. Right. And what's interesting is when we're trying to get to that point, we forget that that's the valuable part and we're chasing after the shiny thing, because the shiny thing is the thing we can post on social media. The shiny thing is what we can, text to our friends or send an invitation out or get the photos or whatever. And again, I think that's all well and good. And that I definitely want to get married and that's important. However, what I've learned is that the process and the journey and the climb up is what builds the most fulfillment, the most satisfaction, the most love, and just the most like abundance in your life versus just chasing after the destination. Because if you're going into a relationship just to get married, then that's not going to be enough, because you're just going to chase the next thing and the next thing
I've always
and the
been that.
next thing.
I'm not outcome driven. Like if you're dating, I always think that I'm like, when you're dating to marry, I'm like, that's the worst place you could be, because what you're doing is you're just looking for an outcome. You're not understanding, well, what does it take to be married? What is it? What is your reasoning for wanting to be married? Like, do you want to do it because it's socially acceptable? You're going to make your family happy? Is this a dream you've had? Like, I have it where it's so funny because I had a really like narcissistic ex, like the one, we all have those relationships that break you. The one that brought me to that place, brought me down to my fucking knees and humbled me down to the point where that was the catalyst for where I'm at now. And now that I have the relationship that I have, that is so beautiful and so incredible and so not what the movie's projected to be and so not what anybody would think, but exactly what it is that I need. People ask all the time, like, well, oh my God, you're so lucky now that you have this. And don't you regret what happened? I'm like, without what happened to me, I wouldn't be here. If I
Right.
didn't have my shitty ex who literally taught me everything I don't want in a relationship and brought me to the depths of hell within my own soul, then I wouldn't have been the amazing partner that I am now. And I wouldn't know how to show up to my partner. And I wouldn't have been ready to receive my partner and build this beautiful life. And even us now, never do we talk about like sometimes we'll talk about marriage or kids or just making sure we both want it. But at the end of the day, even the other day, this morning, he looked and he was like, I just want to clarify, we're moving in together. And he was like, but we're not getting engaged anytime soon. And I was like, oh no, that's fine. I was like, I hope nobody's asking. I'm like, and I'm okay with that because like you said, for us, it's really the journey together that we're building this life and we're seeing if this is working and we're having a great time doing it, as opposed to, well, we need to get married. And it's like, we'll get there when we fucking get there if we get there. And if not, it's okay. It's another lesson. But I can't be so outcome driven, because I feel like when we attach to the outcome, you're overlooking red flags. You're not actually processing the sort of situations for what they are. But then I feel like you're doing yourself such a disservice because you're not actually allowing yourself to grow from these circumstances. You're kind of just on loop over and over thinking that's going to bring you happiness, when it's like, you and I both know when we set goals and then you get to the goal, you're like, what's next? That's always the next question. What's next?
Right. And then I think also you set yourself up to put yourself in a really insecure place and lack stability in a relationship, because now your happiness in the relationship is dependent on whether or not you're going to get married or not. And so if you're in a relationship and let's just say conflict arises and your goal is marriage with this person, like that's all you want, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, are they going to break up with me? Is he or she going to break up with me? Like, oh my gosh, because if they do, that means that my identity is now going to be gone because I'm not going to be able to get married to this person like I wanted to, or whatever the case may be. And so I just think that, yes, I think it's important to say, yes, I want a long-term relationship and I want to get married. I think though, there's a lot of nuance to that, in that you can't just have that be like the thing that base it can't be the thing that you just constantly are shooting towards when it comes to dating. Like, I think it's important to have that as a part of your vision, but I think there's so many other things that have to happen before that's even a conversation with that particular person. Before, that there's so many things that have to happen with that particular person before you even like bring on that type of conversation or discussion.
Totally. Well, I think it's like, don't judge me. I watch a lot of 90 Day Fiance. I love my trash TV. I can't help it. I love it. But there's so many couples like that where it's like they'll meet online, they talk for like a week, and then they're getting married. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're just chasing a feeling. You want to just say that you have your ride or die. And it's like, and then we all know what happens. They end up meeting each other. And sure enough, like tons of conflict. That who is this person? And why are you acting this way? It's like, because you don't fucking know this person. So I'm always big
dopamine's a really powerful chemical, right? And it's
oh
like, I
yeah.
think that it can be very alluring at the beginning to be in this new relationship and it feels great. And you guys are doing all these things together and you like each other. And then all of a sudden that high, that rush wears off. And it's especially hard if you're used to just chasing that next shiny thing, because that's like an adrenaline rush. It's like me chasing my next high when I was younger, right? In that now when things get real and you're like, I'm not as excited about my partner anymore. This doesn't feel as good as it did like months ago. Now you start to question yourself, you start to question the relationship, and then things go through your head like, all right, did I choose the right person, or did I do the right thing, or is this going to last, or like, did I jump in too soon, or whatever the case may be. And I just think being able to identify why you're pursuing a relationship or dating a specific person, I think is very important. Having self-awareness around your own feelings and your own vision, like I said a few minutes ago, but also like learning that in order to get to a place where you have a healthy relationship with whoever it is that you're supposed to have one with, like that it's going to take some pain and it's going to take some
Oh yeah.
vulnerability and discomfort and embracing uncertainty and admitting that you're wrong and admitting that you don't have everything figured out and being okay with not getting attention all the time. Like all these things that can be really, really hard to deal with. I mean, I've certainly been there. Right. And so,
Totally.
yeah.
I think it's like my friend said it yesterday. She was like, I'm trying to connect. Like she's struggling with dating. And she's like, I'm trying to connect with these guys. I don't understand why am I not connecting? I'm trying to be perfect. And I was like, well, that's why. I was like, you're trying to connect on a human level, but you're trying to pretend like you're not human. You want to be perfect and everything has to be amazing and you have no flaws and you have no needs and you have nothing. And I'm like, but that's why people aren't connecting to you because they don't feel like there's an authenticity to it. They're feeling like you, that's why they all keep saying friend vibe. And I'm like, and she had this whole epiphany and we've had so many amazing talks and I'm so proud of her for coming to that. But even just that bit of awareness was able to allow her to level up to now where she was like, holy fuck, I didn't realize I'm coming off to people, etc. So I think the self-awareness component, we could talk about this all day. But Doug, I have one last question I wanted to ask you that one of the people on Instagram asked that I actually really loved this question and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Perhaps you have something for when you're in prison and now, even just now, but how do you keep going on really tough days? So like on those really tough days, how did you not just cave in and be like, fuck it, I'm going back to drugs or I'm not doing it? Like, is there something for you that you want to share about that?
I remember why I started, especially in the early days when things got tough. I remembered that kid that I described, not too long ago in our conversation, where I knew I wanted more for myself and I was just broken, and I never wanted to feel that way ever again. I never wanted to look myself in the mirror and say, like, I don't like you, or I can't believe that you're doing this to yourself, or I can't believe you're not standing up for yourself, or I can't believe you let yourself go, or whatever the things I was saying. And I also, I also now, like, even during tough days where, I mean, I don't really have like days now. It's different because I've gotten such into a rhythm where it's like automatic for me that when things get hard, I just get up anyway. But during the times where things were hard and I was kind of having a hard time, maybe like moving forward with that day or whatever, I would be like, all right, like, um, if I do this, if I get up, if I do the thing today that's tough, I'm going to thank myself for it later. It's going to build this resilience muscle. It's going to build this adversity muscle, and I'm going to feel better. And then once I started to do that, and I started to say, okay, even though I don't feel like going to the gym today, I'm still going to do it. And then I felt better afterwards. I started to teach myself, like, okay, like when things are tough and things are hard, it's okay. Like life's going to be hard, and you still have to go. You still have to move forward anyway. And so, what I will say to this person is that, I feel like there's this trap in the personal development world where you think because you're embarking on this journey that all of a sudden things are going to be easy for you. And the truth is it's
Ah,
not. Personal
no.
development is hard. Doing
Yeah.
the work is hard.
Yeah.
Healing yourself is hard. Changing patterns is hard, right? All these things are tough. And so just being able to accept that that's part of the process and know that you're not alone, I think gets you a lot of the way there, because I feel like sometimes people, they feel like they're not doing something right, or they feel lost, or they're like, why am I feeling this way? I'm doing all the things. But the reality is the journey is tough, and there's going to be ups and downs, and just know that eventually, like, if you do the right things, if you, have healthy coping mechanisms, surround yourself with the right people, go to therapy as needed, listen to certain podcasts, do all the things, that eventually your life will get better. Things will
Like
get
my
better.
mom always said, it works if you work it, right? It's like the age old thing. Like it works if you work it. And it's true. It's like, I, if healing were easy, if all of this stuff were just like a walk in the park, it's like, then everybody would do it. And it's like, that's why most people stay where they are, because the devil they know is easier than the devil they don't. And I even think sometimes for me, like I would have those days where I'm with you, where I felt so alone. I felt like where you're just kind of like, is there anybody on this island besides me? And even something as simple as like taking a shower sometimes would be just enough to like get you the fuck out of it and being like, I'm a badass bitch. I got this. And so, like you said, to anybody that's out there, you're not alone. You're not struggling alone. You've got us here. And I'm just so excited, Doug. Thank you so much for sharing so much and being vulnerable and sharing all of this amazing wisdom with the audience. You have some stuff coming up. I know that you have some exciting things coming up. I'd love for you to share with the listeners.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for having me on. I loved our combo. I mean, I just love just talking mental health and just being real and raw and vulnerable and stuff. Yeah. So we just did a rebrand of the podcast, which I'm super excited about. And did a rebrand of the podcast, which I'm super excited about. Part of Q Code Media now. So I'm excited to have joined them. And then I'm also at the end of September, I'm launching this series on my show, which is called The Adversity Advantage, which might rub some people the wrong way, but hopefully people take it in the best way. And then I'm doing this series on cannabis and marijuana, where I'm interviewing some of the leading experts in the world on marijuana, THC specifically, and how it impacts the brain, how it impacts mental health, how it impacts kids. Just because I've seen, obviously, as I shared, pot nearly destroyed my life, and obviously there's a lot of people now that use it in a way that's legal and healthy and stuff like that, and helps them. That's great. But I've also seen a lot of kids using it in the last few years, and they've ended up in like in the psychiatric hospitals and stuff like that because of what it's done to their brains. And so I just wanted to go on this journey to learn from some of the best on what it is, what it isn't, how it can impact certain people differently and stuff like that. So that's coming out towards the end of September. And yeah, you could just find the show, The Adversity Advantage, wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. And Sabrina, I just want to thank you so much for having me on. You're a great person, and I love your energy. Love what you're doing to just help people not only like improve their quality of their relationships, but improve the quality of their well-being, how they feel about themselves.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. And don't forget, I'm going to be on Doug's podcast. So I will link, I'm going to link the fuck out of it so people can come and support you as well. Go follow, go listen. Doug's podcast is fucking amazing. He's had incredible guests on, and he's an amazing podcaster. So, Doug, I'm so excited. Everything will be in the link of the show notes so people can find you in all ways. And I'm just so excited. Thank you again for sitting with me.
You got it.